All right, we are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us. We're going to take a lot of phone calls. We're talking about the racial divide in America, certainly many of the things that happened over the past couple of weeks. Dr. Siku Franklin's with us from MTSU, political science professor, along with Dr. Rebus Mitchell, of course, from over at Fisk University, and Reverend Enoch Fuzz from Corinthian Missionary Baptist Church. Thank you all three gentlemen for coming on. And let's take a phone call or two, if you don't mind, and then we'll make our way through more of our comments. Brian, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Brian.
Hey, Reverend Fuzz.
Hey, Brian.
My favorite guest panelist. The 3 miles an hour, you get pulled over by the cop. Shoot, I got pulled over. It happened to be a black cop, and I was going like 1 or 2 miles an hour over 50. And I didn't say nothing. I just gave my license, and he goes, I pulled you over because you were in front of me. And I just thought that was kind of weird. So, you know, forget about that. Next, over to the other guy, MTSU. Big difference between him and the guy from Fisk is the Fisk is privately, mostly privately funded. MTSU is not. So he best be careful what he be saying. It happened to the University of Missouri professor. You start getting a little out there. You know, you gotta watch it.
What do you think? God, I don't see anything to that point. But I wanted to, you know, the first point he made, though. All right, talking about, there are going to be white people, some like him, who are going to see this and say, well, I get pulled over sometimes for frivolous things. Well, what's the difference in your mind sometimes with what you end up experiencing and what someone who's Caucasian experiences?
You know, I wasn't really thinking of that as a racial profiling as much as it could be perceived as racial profiling, number one. Number two, what a waste of our public resources to pull somebody over for being 2 or 3 miles over the speed limit.
But did he pull you over for that reason? Did he pull you over to look in your car? To see what you smelt like, to see what you smelt like marijuana, to see whether you, the young man in St. Paul, he was pulled over because of a tail light, but then he had a gun.
Yes.
And so that was justification for execution.
And the young woman who was supposedly committed suicide was pulled over for not turning on her turn signal. So those kinds of things, we don't want to look over and make excuses for this horrendous situation that's happening right now. Someone told me this morning, what about the 5,000 African Americans who kill each other every year? We're talking about police killings right now.
Police can't racially profile. They can't racially profile. Police are supposed to protect all the people.
Yes.
We're all taxpayers.
That's right.
If they can't do that, then you need to, you know, we need to put a whole lot of more effort in selecting police officers and school teachers. Just because someone was in the military and they apply, we need to have great scrutiny about who we put out on the street with a gun. You know?
Well, would you agree that most law enforcement officers mean well and are good men?
Most people mean well.
Most, and well, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that what we're talking about is institutional.
Okay.
And so if you have, if I'm in charge of a university as a president, as a black person, yet all the faculty who are hired are white, or those faculty members who are going into those departments, that they're streamlining women one way, streamlining men another way, even if it's implicit. I have a responsibility to address that, even though it's unintentional, or even though it may be intentional or may be unintentional. So good people, in a broader system of institutional equality, good people could be caught up in a broader pattern of inequity. So yeah, they're good. There are a lot of good police officers, and you know, I try not to personally point fingers at a police officer doing bad or a police officer doing good. In fact, I have family members a brother-in-law who's almost a 20-year police officer in Atlanta, so for Fulton County. So they do an extraordinary. They have an extraordinarily difficult job. But heavy is a head that wears a crown.
Yeah. But don't you sensitize the police department in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where the majority of the police department is white, and the majority of the population is black? Yeah. Don't you say Don't you do a little work there with those folks before you send them out with guns? Don't you do a little work?
And I just want to make a point out, because I know this panel, we're all kind of, you know, black men and everything, but
yes, you are.
Yes. But the racial profiling issue affects black women. In fact, black women have been at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement. 3 of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement were women. LGBT, the LGBT community has experienced an extraordinary amount of profiling and police-related violence. In fact, black transgendered people have suffered an extraordinary amount of deaths on the hands of police or non-investigations when it comes to murder. The immigrant rights community, particularly in this city, was a target of an extraordinary volatile profiling issue, particularly under 287G that was carried out by Sheriff Darren Hall. And so when you look at the people who are pouring into the Black Lives Matter protests around the country, although it's led by black folks, although racial equity is at the forefront of it, if you really look at the Black Lives Matter protests around the country, it's really a mosaic of the American democratic experiment. It's really a racial mosaic. It's the most integrated, multiracial platform at this point in time right now in American politics.
All right, let's take a call from David. David, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, David.
One of the problems that we have is that back in 1981, corporate America started buying out the American news media and turning it into the American infotainment media, and they're tying your hands of what you can and cannot report. And another thing is that the term law enforcement is now obsolete. In a totalitarian nation, they're the apace. Absolute power, absolute corruption enforcement. And criminal cases aren't over until you pay an extortion fee to the bar. They call it a non-conviction, non-plea bargain, expungement order. You don't pay the fee, they assassinate you.
He's making a point, Nick. This is a very divisive issue right now, and good people, and there are more good people than there are people out here who've lost their minds. The good people have got to be willing to work together. Dr. Franklin, we've got to keep talking to one another. I wanted to attend the Black Lives Matter rally Friday night. I called several pastors and said, let's go and support them. Like you guys showed up to support the Chiefs' prayer rally. We should go and support them. But you know what happens? I'm a person who's willing to listen to all the sides. Those pastors told me the Black Lives Matter protest people won't listen. They yell and accuse and call you names. What I'm saying right now again, the kind of thing that Dr. Franklin had brought out, I want to get all the people in the same room and let's talk about this. I know that there's some issues with our police department here. Our police department knows that. I believe that the police are the ones who can fix what's happening right now. The police have got to step up and not cover up.
And so, and with that regard, Chief Anderson sent out a statement not long after what happened with these two other incidents, asking that people, at least locally, not put, you know, the PD here in the same category as some of these other departments. What did you think of that?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you've done that and you have the best PR machine behind you, which is what Chief Anderson has.
Yeah.
What matters is, what have you said about the Operation Safe for Streets program? What have the pastors said about it? What have you said about TBI investigating police-related volatile confrontations? What matters is what has Anderson said about a civilian review board that has subpoena powers, full subpoena powers across the board? What has Anderson said about racial profiling training, a real substantive racial profiling training, on all those concrete policy issues? Anderson has been the biggest obstructionist. Now, he's very good at talking to pastors. He's very good at talking to politicians. He's a survivor. He's a politician. He's been in Metro PD for 3 decades. But when it comes to substantive, serious policies, and that's why the Black Lives Matter folks, that's their resistance. They're not shouting, they're not yelling, that's what the pastors assume, but they're no nonsense. It's about dealing with concrete issues that attempt to address not just police-related shootings, which are, quite frankly, are rare, but that deals with the daily humiliation. Because when you humiliate people, they never forget it. It stays with them. and they don't take Anderson seriously. Unfortunately, Pastor Fuzz, they don't think the pastors are serious. They don't think the pastors.
See, that's what I'm saying. They're saying that let's come and talk. I think it was commendable that Chief Anderson allowed people to shut down the interstates. Allowed people to march without permits, to protest, and to have freedom of expression. Let's come around the table and have that freedom of expression.
Anderson did not allow the protesters to do anything. To say that he allowed the protesters to do something is almost like saying he's an overseer.
Well, he didn't move in to arrest them all like we saw in Baton Rouge.
I want to make this point because I know something about how the protests were organized. The protests were organized strategically in such a way in which the protesters themselves organized that protest tactically, in which they themselves, at least in the second protest, did not allow themselves to be arrested. So we give Anderson credit because it's wrapped up in this kind of PR machine. But look, again, I want to emphasize this point. We either have, and I say this both as a social scientist, but also as a person who works closely with at least some of the activists, not all of them, because I don't know all the conversations, but it's either justice for all or justice for no one. That's the argument they make. Folks do not want to face the daily humiliation. Again, it's not just about police-related shootings or were you arrested at a rally and is Anderson good? It's about the daily humiliation that people face on a day-to-day level, which sticks with you across time.
Dr. Mitchell, now I understand what he's saying there, but I think we all have to agree that while some of these shootings thankfully aren't as common as some people would think, there have been some very high-profile ones, and it seems like there's another one every couple weeks. It really does over the last year, and some brutal ones, all caught on video. People are furious. I mean, anyone who sees some of these videos has to be angry. I don't care the color of your skin, but that's where I think some people are tired of the talking and they're taking
the panel
action.
This morning, though, shows you the change in America.
Okay.
The last civil rights movement was led by ministers, and ministers could tell the people what to do. These protest movements are led by civil activists, by scholars, by social activists, so people have been out there. So it's very difficult. The establishment is more accustomed to dealing with Reverend Fuzz than Dr. Franklin. The white establishment feels better about Reverend Fuzz than Dr. Franklin. But it's not about comfort level. Can't go by what was. You got to deal with what is. And now people make decisions for themselves. When they see a video, when they see something on a cell phone, doesn't make any difference what I say in a classroom, doesn't make any difference what you broadcast here. It's what they see. They make the decisions for themselves. So we all have to become critical. We all have to become accountable. When I was a lad, my grandmother told me if you ever get in trouble, find the policeman. He'll help you. The policeman's your friend. I told my sons when they were growing up, be respectful. But if you ever see the police come around, be careful. Be very careful.
And I want to make a point because I want to make what I try to convey is this is my personal opinion is I don't think that the pastors are sellouts or anything like that. And this is mainly my relationship with some of the activists. In the case of someone like Pastor Fuzz, I try to explain, he's played a heroic role in this community around really, saving everything from saving Metro General Hospital, I think. Not just him, but quite a few pastors. But the fact of the matter is that many of the young people do not feel that the established black leadership is on their side. And when the Michael Brown protest initially happened, in meetings from Mount Zion Baptist to Jefferson Street Baptist, and in between, the pastors huddled around Chief Anderson. And the public perception among young people was that they huddled around Chief Anderson with no questions asked. So what is a young black person supposed to say if they're being stopped going home, if they're being profiled, if they're being pulled over, if they're being mistreated, followed in stores, yet the leadership, the black leadership in the city, from the city council members, all due respect with them, I love them, the black council members, the black pastors, the black businesses, if they circle the wagons around Anderson, which is what the interpretation that they had, which is what the interpretation was, that they circled the wagons around Anderson, no questions asked. And at the same time, the black youth, not only do they have their own personal experiences, but we're looking at 16,000 stops between January 2014, in majority black and brown communities, based upon the data, 80% led to no arrest. But it didn't lead to arrest, but it led to parking tickets. You know what that happens when you get a parking ticket or you get a citation? It's a tax. It's a poll tax. So in this city, black and brown communities are bearing a disproportionate amount of the cost for bringing revenue in the city compared to white kids from Green Hills who have weed in their car. And the Black Lives Matter folks were the Black Lives Matter ecosystem, because it's not just the Black Lives Matter organization, but the larger ecosystem, believe that for right or wrong, that the pastors circled the wagons around Anderson. No questions asked. Yet they did not circle the wagons and support young people. At the same time, they've been castigated over and over again by the elders for not getting involved.
All right, on that note, we have to take a break. Point taken. We'll take a break. When we come back, more of our conversation. We'll try to squeeze in some calls as well. Stay with us.